Okay, hello, my name's Yvonne Douglas Morris, and today I'm going to be presenting part 2 of staying afloat in the COVID-19 job market. We had part 1 last week, and the session today is the follow-up. Thank you. Okay, so what we're going to be covering today is basically a recap of what we discussed last week. I'll go into that more in a moment, but I also want to add that I'm not a legal advisor and I'm not a job advisor. My background is around 40 years in different industries, in third sector, in private sector and public sector. My last role was a senior manager at a trust in Surrey. So in terms of managing interviews, recruiting, building teams, knowing what to look for when looking for staff, I think I can fairly say I've got ample experience. So hopefully you enjoy the workshop today. So today we're going to be covering a recap from last week, all the questions that have been sent in from participants last week, and any other questions you feel you might want me to try and answer for you. So we know that the horizon, which is what we looked at last week, the current horizon, there's lots of difficulties in terms of the aftermath of the pandemic, and also lots of worrying, there's lots of uncertainty, lots of income limitations, lots of people worrying about what's going to happen next. You know, we don't even know entirely what's happening with the schools, you know, parents out there are worrying. Life is certainly different for the majority of people right now, okay? We also know that the government was paying 80% of wages of furloughed employees, and that was to help stem any potential redundancies. However, we do know that throughout the stages of being furloughed, you can be made redundant at any time. I strongly suspect by talking to different organisations that we are going to see a lot more redundancies now. We're seeing it already in the retail market, for example. So just to be aware of that. We know that young people have been one of the hardest hit in the country. Around 400,000 students finishing their degrees this year have seen their opportunities evaporate overnight. So you can imagine they thought they had something to go to, but there's nothing now. There's nothing for them. And one of the reactions to that is the Chancellor announced last week there's a £2 billion pot for kickstart schemes to create more jobs for young people. So that would be under a 6-month work placement umbrella, particularly for people on universal credit. Not a great start in terms of duration for a job for them, but that 6-month experience, you know, that's going to speak volumes for them, you know, and the young people need the experience on their CVs. And whilst we're talking about experience, I want young people to think about volunteering as well. You can volunteer virtually. There's lots of organisations out there wanting the savviness, the quickness of the young mind. So do think about approaching organisations to offer that. We looked at lots of job market reports, but just to skim over what we did look at, oops. Keep forgetting this is a Mac. We saw that job applications soared by a massive 32% in June. Alongside this, there were 106% more applicants battling it out for every job than there was a year ago. So every role you go for, there's loads of other people who get a job. So if you spent all that time putting your CV together and it's not formatted correctly, you've missed out eye-catching information, you're not even going to get an interview. All right, so just be aware of that. However, we did see job numbers picking back up on a month-by-month basis, with an increase of over 30% in June. I also highlighted some really great resources last week where you can get lots of information about how the pandemic has shaped the economy. And this was a really nice resource. If you go to Hayes, you can just tap in Market Insights report and you'll be able to get this resource. As well, you can go onto the government website, loads of information on the government website. Right, we also looked at CVs. And I also shared that recruiters take on average 6 seconds to make a decision about your CV. 6 seconds, not a lot of time. So as I said, make sure it's delivered correctly, it's presented correctly. Make sure you don't waffle, make sure you address what's in the job description and your CV highlights that. This is an example of a CV that's great and an example of a CV that's not so great. It's the same person talking about the same sort of experience, but you can see how it's delivered. And we went over this last week. We also really dug deep in terms of what to put into a CV. So this gives you a snapshot of some of the areas that we covered. You can see there in terms of gaps, try not to leave any gaps in employment. Put the reason why there is a gap. You know, maybe you'd be starting a family, you may have been traveling, just put your reason in, okay? So to remember, you know, when you're looking at putting your CV together, start with a professional summary followed by your skills, your focus on achievements. These should be on the first page. A lot of recruiters don't have time to go to all the other pages. It's that first page that's going to pull them in, okay? Don't advertise a furlough or a layoff. Same for the cover letter. Jacqueline highlighted buzzwords earlier in the conversation we had before everyone joined. Be creative. If your CV looks like everybody else's, you're not going to get a look in, okay? It's boring, it's bland. Word versus PDFs, as I mentioned last week, they're both acceptable formats. However, some recruiters, when they get a PDF, it goes all gobbledygook. Okay? It doesn't land on their screen as well, and information could be missing. So bear that in mind. You must tailor your CV for every potential employer. And as I mentioned earlier, look at the job description. What are they asking for? Match your skills and experience to it. What we're seeing currently in the market is employers now are looking for around 90% of what they're asking for in that person's spec. Before COVID, you could have demonstrated transferable skills. Now they want actual skills. So if they've said that that's what they want in their job description, they've got thousands of people that can give them that. So why should they take the person who's just transferable? So just bear that in mind when you're looking for jobs, okay? It's really competitive now. Make sure you meet all the criteria. Apply as soon as you can. We're seeing jobs being locked down because there's so many people applying for them. So apply as soon as you can. Don't wait until the 11th hour to apply for a job, okay? Young people, as I said last week, don't just hand your CVs into shops. It's going to go into a dusty filing cabinet. Always go for live roles. Don't waste your time just handing in CVs. Beware, check the credentials of emails you receive. They're not always from people who you think they are. There are loads of websites out there. Beware. There's loads of agencies coming up that are really taking advantage of people looking for work. Keep an eye on the search bars. I've experienced this myself. When you click on a search bar, check that it stays on that organisation and it doesn't click to a different organisation. Okay, don't give any bank details until you've actually been offered a job. And that should ideally be in an email direct to you, not via an online website where you have got to complete a form. And always look out for credible employers, really important. Your cover letter, we looked at that last week. I'm not going to go through everything here, but pick 2 to 3 skills or abilities you want to highlight. Then offer examples of times you've demonstrated those abilities in your past work. Now, those skills and abilities should match the job spec. Okay, so there's no point going for a job that's working in a shop and then you're talking about washing cars. It's stupid. It's a waste of your time and the recruiter's time. Okay, and also show how you added value to previous companies. What impact did you bring? What difference did you make? You know, really wave your flag. And we also spoke about graduates. They're not going to have much experience, but they can talk about projects or classes or volunteer work that they've done before. Okay, so really sorry, I can hardly see my screen here. It's been blocked out by some of the people online. So 70% of employers use social media to screen candidates during the hiring process. Okay, so think twice before you put content online. And at least 43% use that to check in past employee, to check employees, so sorry. So think twice before you hit enter. Be conscientious of how you present yourself. Always ask yourself, if a potential employer sees this, would they be happy with it? So the interviews here. Some top interview skills, we looked at those. Obviously, you prepare, be punctual, think before speaking, speak clearly, concisely, and calmly, okay? It's okay to ask questions like, I didn't hear you, can you repeat that again? It's fine, okay? Just engage your brain before you answer. Be confident, not arrogant, listen, and express gratitude at the end. And also make sure you prepare. You cannot prepare enough for an interview. We spoke about this last week. Interviews now are virtual via Skype, Google, Hangouts, FaceTime, etc. However, be aware that you're going to potentially be plagued with similar issues to a telephone interview. So there could be blips on the line, it could drop out, etc., etc. Be aware of distractions. Arrive before the interviewer. That looks really good. If it's a virtual interview, you're sitting there waiting to be let in. Log on details. As I said last week, write them down, because if everything collapses and you've got to log on again, it saves you scurrying around in your inbox for the log on details. Have your questions ready, and your final question, as I said last week, you ask the interviewer, the interview has now come to an end. Now that I have the opportunity, is there anything that I need to clarify, that you need clarification on, that whilst I have the chance, I can answer again? Really important, because sometimes they think, well, actually, you wasn't quite clear on that. So this is your chance to answer that final, to answer that final question and get some clarity on what they may not have understood. Okay, you're not going to get another chance once you walk out that interview room. We also looked at how do you look. If you look in the red circle here, this is an actual news presenter in America, was talking to their co-worker, and you can see the camera has caught this gentleman just in his jacket, and he obviously had boxers on and did not put his trousers on. Be very careful how you dress for interviews. You get dressed and you go prepared for an interview. A virtual interview, they may ask you to stand up and present. And if you're in last night's pajamas, how's that going to look? So do think of that. Think of lighting in terms of when you're in the interview environment at home. Walk around the room, see how it looks, play around with it, okay? As I mentioned last week, you can put items under the device, like, oops, sorry, I'll show you that. Like here, here are some examples of different things you can use to put your device onto. You can also see a picture of the lady here. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor moving, that when you look down into the camera, it can make parts of your body look bigger versus looking straight into the camera. So do think about that. So just a little checklist here in terms of this area. Research the company, review your CV, think about facts, figures, and the compliments you can talk about, okay? Find out who you're speaking with, that's really good. And another thing I always say to people as well is sometimes you get the opportunity to call up and find out about the job. I love it when any jobs that I have and a candidate calls up to talk about the role, you know, to talk about what's the office like, what are the team like, because that's telling me that that person's really interested, they want to know more. And also, for them, they could decide they don't want that role. So, you know, it's always good to call up and find out about the role. Prepare great questions to ask. Think about your previous interviews and questions they asked and how you can adapt those. Review the job description. You must know that job description inside out, because sometimes in an interview they can say to you, what part of the job description will you find challenging? Prepare for the common questions, loads of information online. Be ready to explain any previous job changes. Get your outfit ready and relax, okay? You've got to remember they're human as well. The recruiters are human as well, just like you. What I want to just talk about as well is crib sheets. Somebody mentioned that they were really interested in the crib sheets. A crib sheet is a resource. It's a piece of paper that you can use to map information that helps you with remembering certain information later on. So using the STAR method, which hopefully the majority of you know is the situation, the task, the action, and the result. So these are all methods that you would use to answer an interview question. What was the situation? What was the task? What was the action you took? And what was the result? This is an example of one of my own crib sheets. I'm going to go into this one here, which can highlight an answer for 3 different questions. So this crib sheet would answer a question on working under pressure, being flexible, a good team player. What was the situation? In my previous job, a work colleague left unexpectedly. She had been responsible for a project that had to be delivered within a very tight deadline. It was a very important project that would bring many benefits to the organisation. That's the situation. The task, my boss asked for someone from the team to take on the project and for the person to make sure it ran smoothly. What was the action I took? I stepped up and offered to help. I saw this as an opportunity to help out the company in the hour of need because I like to help where I can. So it goes on to talk about the different actions, then the result. Make sure your result is always positive. Don't go and say, I did all this and then the project fell down. We didn't meet the deadline. Never, ever have a negative result, okay? Always positive. So this person did finish the project on time and was within budget, and their boss was really happy. As I said last week, prepare several of these and you study them and have them ready so that when you go for interview, you can reel off exactly what a good answer is. And over time, you'll be able to work out what the structure is and answer comfortably. Really, really good. You should have at least around 5 of these, okay? And work out which questions that crib sheet can answer. So in this case, there are 3 different questions this crib sheet could answer. Okay? So any questions before I move on to the questions that were sent in? No? Okay. Andrew? Is he there?
Just hold on for a second. Okay, thanks, Yvonne. Okay, so before we move on to the questions which were sent in, as Yvonne said, are there any questions that you would like to Yvonne to answer regarding what she just said, basically?
I have a question. Hi,
Hi.
my name's Rianne, and
Hi.
I was wondering, so I'm 23 years old and I left uni 2 years ago. So with regards to like my experience is kind of limited in terms of, for example, I did like sales in like Next or waitressing, in addition to like kind of more, I would say like public sector roles. Like for example, I had an internship and now I currently have a 1-year role as part of a company. And so I wanted to ask, with regards to like tailoring my CV to specific roles, how would that apply in terms of meeting the criteria of the role when I might not have set experience?
So did you say you're currently doing an internship, did you say?
So no, I've done one previously, so I'm saying that my experience is limited in comparison to what the role that I want to go into requires.
This is quite a big, this is a problem potentially, but it's fixable because I currently help young people and even some family members, and what I find is that sometimes young people can go for roles where there is so much experience that they cannot bring to that role. So this is a difficult scenario. Would you agree what you're saying?
Yeah.
So you've got to remember that you can go for it, but my question would be is always try and go for a role that you feel that you can meet the criteria. You know, you can go for it and then demonstrate transferable skills. However, we are in a job market that's very, very competitive.
Yeah.
Very competitive. And if it's a certain sector you want to get into, like marketing, to gain that experience so that you can get that experience on your CV, you could do some volunteering virtually for a few months just to get the experience on your CV. Yeah, because if you think of a recruiter wanting somebody with that experience, why should they go for somebody who's got minimal experience versus somebody who's got maximum experience? So pitch, when you're looking for jobs, pitch the level of the job that you're searching for in line with your experience. So you're talking to you, I'm feeling that you're entry level. Yeah?
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect an entry level applicant to apply for a middle management role. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yvonne, can I ask what kind of job you're looking for?
So I'm currently a data assistant.
Yeah.
The only job I would be looking for is kind of to move into like maybe a junior analyst role.
Okay.
So it would still be entry level.
Okay.
So you said the word junior. So the fact that the employer has stipulated junior, they know that whoever is applying is going to need some support. They know this person is a junior, they're not a senior member of staff, potentially, they are a junior, they're going to need some assistance. So this is, so that, can you see already that the match sounds quite good to me?
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
No worries. Okay, anything else, anybody else before we move on?
Hi, it's Angela here.
Hi, Angela.
Where employers push you into filling out an application form, would you still send in your CV alongside the application form if you feel that you have a very good CV?
Yes, I would say you could send it in, but if they say don't send in a CV, obviously don't send in a CV.
Yeah.
I mean, if they've asked for an application form, you could send your CV in and they don't read it.
Mm.
That's the whole, or the other type of application is a cover letter and your CV, or a cover letter and a statement. Or it's very rare that an organisation is going to want an application and a CV, because your application is going to have all the information that they've stipulated, and they've put that application in a format to collect the information they need to make a decision on whether or not to invite you for interview.
Yeah, okay. I tend to not send in both. I tend to just do the application form if that's what they've asked for, but I just wondered if there was any value in sending one in at all, a CV.
And I suppose it depends on the employer as well.
Yeah.
But again, if they've said an application only, I personally wouldn't send a CV in myself.
Because then it's like you're not listening to what the employer wants and you're falling at the first hurdle. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, let's move on, because there is a time for question and answers as well afterwards as well. So
let's look at some of the questions.
Yeah, and then we can come back to question and answer. Thank you so much, Angela.
Can you hear me?
Yep, go for it.
So this is one of the next session is we asked for questions to be sent in that we could answer this week. So this one was, tell us about yourself. What things should we include when answering this interview question? So that the majority of interviews, they're going to ask you, tell me about yourself. So you need to talk about where you are now. So I'm applying for this job because blah, blah, blah. I believe I have the skills to be blah, 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 blah. So talk about where you are now. Then you also talk about why you feel that this role, you could do it. So why are you sitting? So you need to be thinking, why am I sitting in this chair having a discussion with this interviewer? There's a reason I want this job. So I need to tell them why I want this job. Yeah, to start to think of that mindset, okay? Talk about where you are now. Discuss how you got there, okay? So how did you get to the stage where you are now? So then you talk about your past experience. So in 10 years ago, I was an administration manager. I managed a team of 6 members of staff. I was responsible for the office, day-to-day running of the office. There was an element of health and safety. After that, I went into the public sector, and I did blah, 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 blah. So how did you get to where you are now? Okay. And because of my experience, I feel I'll be of benefit to your organisation. Share your goals for your future. I feel by being in this role, it will develop my skills. I really like the training you offer. I've looked online. I've had a conversation with the person that's recruiting, blah, blah, blah. Make it all synchronise, because they're going to want to know what you're thinking about in terms of your future goals as well. So that's how I would answer that question. What not to say. Now I can just about see my screen here, so I'm just going to click a button to see if I can see more of my screen. Just bear with me. Oh, super, great stuff. Okay, so what not to say. Don't share too much or too little. Please don't go in there and talk about what the cat or your dog didn't have for dinner last night. You know, be very, very careful what you discuss. Don't overdo it. And then not too little information either, okay? Avoid potentially contentious subjects such as political or religious opinions. Avoid them like the plague. Don't talk about a hobby that might seem to be more important to you than your career, okay? I did have a situation once where a young lady came in and she was great. We really liked her. She started to speak about her sideline, which was buying and selling properties. And she wanted a part-time role. And then we thought, well, if she wants a part-time role and she's buying and selling properties, that means she's not going to give the attention needed potentially to this job. So be careful what you share, okay? Be careful. Avoid sharing personal information about your family, okay? So just be mindful of that. Oops. Another question came in was the do's and don'ts in an interview. There's lots and lots of stuff online, and a lot of it is common sense as well, but just to sort of capture some of the do's and don'ts in an interview. Do your research, dress appropriately, arrive on time, it's all there. Watch your body language. Don't show up late, don't dress too casually. Don't badmouth your current job. Never ever do that. Okay, you could be having a horrific time in your current role. Please don't share that experience. Okay, check that your phone is turned off. Also, prepare some examples in terms of your skills and your strengths. I've just spoken to you about the crib sheet. Don't arrive too early. There is nothing worse than preparing for interview and you've got candidates lining up outside. There's nothing, it's because what it does is it makes the interviewer think as well that you're demonstrating poor organisation, okay? You're arriving too early. I would suggest arriving 15 minutes before an interview, 10 minutes, okay? That's about right. Be polite and courteous. Plan your route, obviously. You don't want to get there all huffed and puffed. You want to get there in a nice, relaxed state. Prepare for the weakness question. There's a 99% chance they're going to ask you, what is your weakness? And as I mentioned last week, we all have a weakness. Whatever you'd say, don't say I haven't got any weaknesses. Don't say that. Talk about something that you were weak in before and how you overcame that weakness, what steps you took to overcome that weakness. It could be something like, a year ago, I was quite weak on Excel. What I've been doing over the last year is I've been doing bite-sized learning on YouTube to up my skills. I'm now a lot more comfortable with it, and I'd love the chance to be given the chance to showcase my improvements. Okay, you can send a thank you note. However, me personally, it would depend on how that thank you note is pitched, because it could seem as just being a little bit over the top. You could send a polite email, thank you for the interview today. As I mentioned before, don't be controversial. Don't lie about your skills. You will be found out eventually. Okay, I've known people to say that they have degrees, and when they've started their job and the checks have taken place, they've been found out not to have degrees, particularly in the public sector, and they've been asked to leave. Don't lie. It's really not worth it. Don't hound the interview. Don't bring up salary. Wait until your job has been offered, because if they want you and they can work it and they're able to work the salary to bring you in, they will do so. Don't bring it up at interview, okay? So this question came in. Should you ever slightly exaggerate in an interview or application? Okay, right. So what I'm going to say is never lie. Okay, I've just mentioned that. It's okay to make something bigger than it is, because you need to sell yourself in that interview. You know, it's a marketplace. So of course you can slightly exaggerate, you know, as long as you can back it up with the experience. Don't go over the top though. So to just keep it balanced, so that you can sort of big yourself up and to showcase your skill. But just be mindful, okay? The word slightly is the right word, but don't over exaggerate. Hopefully I've answered the question for that person. Interviewers are very, very good as well normally. Well, I know when I interview staff, you normally can tell when somebody's blagging or not, okay? So just be mindful of that. Another question, is it always okay to put on my CV references upon request, or will the employer think that it's too much having to chase this person up to get references? My take on CVs is, I personally don't think you need to put it references upon requests. Maybe the youngsters that are coming out of uni can, but I personally think that references on request is taking up space on your CV where you could be putting other information. Because my question out to everyone is, if an employer wants you, aren't they going to ask for a reference anyway? So why put it on your CV? That's my take on it. Others may think differently, but I don't think you need to put it on there, okay? I think this is the last question that came in. So this person asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? How do you answer this in an interview, especially when you don't even see yourself staying in the role in the next 5 years? So for the example this person gave is, might see themselves having a child, so just looking to work for 3 years, or just wanted to gain experience with the company for 2 years, then want to move on to develop skills elsewhere. So, before the interview, think about the answer to this interview question ahead of time. Keep in mind what the interviewer wants to know when they ask this question. What they're looking for, they want to see what your work-related goals are, what your ambitions are, what training needs you might have, and so on, okay? What type of positions do you see yourself occupying? What type of training? Are you interested in leadership positions? You know, this is probing, where do you see yourself over the next 5 years? What are your plans, you know? So write out your 5-year plan, make a list of a roadmap as to how you're going to achieve that plan. And this will help you share where you see yourself in 5 years' time from an honest and thoughtful perspective. And that's a really good exercise to do to prepare for this question. Don't say, I'm coming, I'd like to join this organisation for the short term. I only would like the role for a year. Never, ever say that. Don't put timelines on why you want to join an organisation, okay? Arranging interviews and recruiting staff costs organisation a lot of time and a lot of money. And if they've just invested time to get you to an interview stage, and you turn around and you give any evidence that you're not going to stay, they're not going to take you on, okay? They need people that are potentially showing that they're going to stay to support the organisation meet their objectives. Whatever you do, don't say, I don't know. Because that's going to tell an interviewer, this person has no ability to plan. This person doesn't seem to know what they want to do. Now, please don't say, I don't know. And please don't say that you want their position. People have been known to say that. I'm actually after a job similar to yours. Don't say that. Okay? And I think that's it. Yep, that's it. We're going to come on to some questions in a minute, but I just wanted to touch on thinking outside the box, which we looked at last week, and just to think about some sidelines you can do from your couch. We've got, as I said earlier, we've got to think differently now. The world has changed. So think about how you can make a little bit of money, or potentially big lots of money if your sidelines grow. So you can sell an information product. People love to learn new things. So for example, do you know how to train pets? Can you give good dating advice? You can actually turn those insights into an ebook, and people will pay for ebooks. If you have an ebook and you charge £25 per ebook and you're selling 10 per month, that's £250. Okay, so think about your expertise and how you can put that into an ebook. You can become a virtual assistant. They do practically anything: appointments, taking calls, writing, proofreading, etc., etc., or editing. You can create a niche review websites, loads of blogs out there. You know, people can tap into that, and then eventually they might want to advertise on your space. You can even proofread. There are lots of proofreading recruitment websites out there where you can just do proofreading, and you can do that sitting on your sofa comfortably, like the lady in the picture. Translation. Do you know another language? You can again do translation for different organisations out there. So just think outside the box in terms of going forward, in terms of starting a business or a little sideline on the side. So, any questions?
Thank you, Yvonne. Excellent, well done, well done. Okay, let's open this up now. So this is something, another question that came in was that everyone wanted a really open session where they can ask Yvonne as many questions as possible. So we've got, we've maybe got about 15 minutes. So if you've got a question you don't want to say it out, please put it into the chat and I will read it out for you. But I will ask anybody else now. Yeah, let's go for it. Any questions for Yvonne? You've got your own personal assistant or personal advisor for the next 15 minutes. So let's go for it.
Anything? Anyone?
Anyone? Let me just say as well. So I think you touched on it right at the end as well regarding. I remember when I was a young man many years ago. And I went for an interview. It was actually with IBM, and the guy said, you know, where do you see myself in 5 years? And I said, oh, I'm doing your job. I never got the job. Is there, you know, they're lost, but yeah, I didn't get the job. But hey, there we go.
Have any questions come in via the chat, Andrew?
No questions via the chat so far.
Oh, very quiet. This very quiet. Okay.
Yeah, very quiet. So no questions, anyone? Okay. All right. While you guys are thinking about stuff, I've got a poll, so please bear with me. I'm going to press pause for a second.